Hey guys, I've got some more work for you on the glutes, but this time side lying, and I'm going to start with some body butter. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Have I mentioned that I make it? You can get yours right here at this link. I hope this works. Or check out the comments below. I will add the link to my website right there. The other link I will include down in the comments is the step-by-step guide to how to get your client into a side-lying drape. I love the side-lying position, but I really particularly love it for the glute medius and the glute minimus. If you saw with my other glute video, I kind of was doing a lot of funny things to try to get into that glute medius, and it's not always easy on my own body mechanics, but here the glute medius and minimus are pointed up to the ceiling, and I have a lot of access to it, and the first thing I want to do is petrissage the daylights out of it. I want to knead it to the point where it really feels like it's coming away from the underlying structures below, and I want to help this compacted muscle and its sidekick feel a little more free and help it feel like it's not so latched onto the lateral hip. The interesting thing about the glute medius and the glute minimus is that they're on the side of the hip, and when people stand on one leg and shoot their hip out, which most of us do, I do it, totally guilty of it, we are really relying on those two little muscles to hold our hips in. So not only are they responsible for a ton of movement, but they really hold our hips in when we're standing dysfunctionally. Now that I've got a sufficient amount of blood flow in there, I want to start doing some more specific work. I can use a soft fist like you just saw, or I can use my forearm, and I'm going to slide across the fibers of these muscles and start to sink in on a deeper level. The glute medius specifically is incredibly thick and incredibly strong, and sinking down to those deeper levels is going to be an important part of the healing process. I'm starting to do some more specific work here on the glute medius, and if you think about the glute medius, it looks a lot like the deltoid and is attached to a limb and does all the same stuff and is remarkably similar. So there's posterior, middle, and anterior fibers. I'm coming from the posterior fibers and I'm pushing the glute medius forward and away from the glute max and those posterior glute fibers, those deep six lateral rotators, and all of the connective tissue that tends to get really stuck. It goes without saying that you want to stay in really good communication with your client here. Some people love this deep work and overuse their hips, and some people have weaker hips, and this work can be really sensitive. For those clients who love this deep work, it is time for my forearm and my elbow. This time I'm working from anterior to posterior just to switch it up a little bit, and as I sink in, I'm starting with my forearm and then using my elbow to really pinpoint anything that I feel like might need some extra attention. I have found that this area tends to be a common little pocket for trigger points, and trigger points in the glute medius are typically going to go down into the IT band and sometimes up into the low back, but hold these, hang out here, let them release, do what you do best. The glute medius sits like an upside down teardrop on the lateral aspect of the leg, and the glute minimus is this tiny little muscle underneath of that actually wraps around to the front and sits kind of behind the TFL and is really responsible, there's the TFL, and is really responsible for a lot of hip flexion, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of people think about the glutes. To address this muscle, I want to sink through the glute medius and I want to push the TFL forward, and as I sink down into this muscle, with most really deep muscles like this, I'm just going to find that depth and then create a little friction. I always want to make nice in between, but once I sink down and get in there, I'm just going to create a little friction and I'm going to break apart those deep myofascial adhesions and help that tiny little muscle feel like it's got a little more movement and a little more breath. Deeper muscles tend to have a harder time letting go, so with my client in side lying, I like to ask my client to let their knee drop down to the table. It really opens up the hip and softens all of this really tightly wound tension. Another option to get this tiny little muscle to let go is an active pin and stretch. So once I've gotten down to the depths of it, I'm going to kind of pin it down to the anterior hip, and I'm going to ask my client to extend their hip and straighten their leg down to the table and then let it relax down. So again, I'm going to pin it down, ask my client to extend their leg back, holding their leg up off the table and pushing all of that connective tissue down as she lets her leg go, and really just flushing everything out and down into the IT band, into the quads, and allowing everything to relax. With her leg extended down now, the glute minimus is elongated. So I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to slide down into that muscle and create a little friction with it in its lengthened state, resetting those fibers, resetting that connective tissue, and allowing it to be nice and long. Petrissage again, because why not? In the side lying position, your client's top leg is going to fall down a little bit farther and that hip is going to open up. So this is the perfect position to do an active release technique on the glute medius. It's already slightly lengthened, so once I sink in, I'm going to ask her to lift her leg up off the table, engaging all the fibers. And then when she relaxes, I sink down and push her hip down away from her low back, from her rib cage, and allow the head of the femur to actually have some space away from the hip bone. I'm a huge fan of forearm and elbow work, and this is a great position to do it in because the glute medius can be very strong, and if I'm having a hard time getting in there with my thumb, I sure as hell want to use my elbow. So as I sink in with my elbow, I'm doing the same thing here. I'm having her lift her leg up, and as she relaxes it, I'm sinking down even deeper, creating some nice space in that lateral hip. Opening up a client's glutes, all three of them, can be incredibly revealing for a client's dysfunction. A lot of low back pain, a lot of knee pain, a lot of ankle pain can come from this connection of the leg up into the low back via the hip. Work on the glutes is always going to entail some work on the legs and some work in the low back just to make everything feel connected and to remind everything of its relationship to each other because, well, I'll leave you with this thought. Ask yourself, how many muscles does it take to twerk? If you can't tell, I really love my body butter. I think you'll love it just as much as I do, and you can even get your own spatula. Head over to my website. The link is in the description below.